Hello, and welcome to The Connection. This podcast is about understanding and building the connection we have with others and with ourselves. I hope that through this podcast, you will learn to have more joy and fulfillment in your life. I'm your host, Jared Hurst. So, this week, I wanted to talk about something that's been on my mind lately. I'm going to start off by sharing a story with you. An example. Some of you might be familiar with Steph Curry or Stephen Curry, depending on how you reference him. Regardless of whether you know who he is or not, he is one of the greatest shooters in NBA basketball history. Just an absolute incredible shooter. Doesn't matter if you like sports or not, just trust me, this is relevant. So, Steph Curry, when he practices, he shoots 500 shots a day. When you end up taking that out over the course of time, in about a 15-year period, he shot a little over 2.5 million shots in practice. If you look during that exact same time, how many shots that he took in an actual game, like when it matters, right? During that time, he took 15,000 shots. So 2.5 million shots in 15 years during practice and 15,000 shots in game in that same period. That's less than 1/10 of 1% of his shots occurred during a game. Does that make sense? Less than 1/10 of 1% of his shots came during a game. So, if you're considered one of the greatest shooters in the history of a sport, why would you keep practicing at that level for that long? I mean, at that point, do you really need to keep putting in that kind of work? When I look at it and I say, okay, why do you even practice to begin with? One, he's creating muscle memory. He's training his body how to repeat that action over and over and over again so that his body is able to do that at the most efficient way possible. And then the other reason that he puts in so much practice, because I'm sure if he was doing 250 shots a day instead of 500 shots a day, he could train his muscle memory to be able to be an incredible shooter. But when you put in all of that extra work, it's so that you can show up during the hard moments. When you're at the end of the game and the game is on the line and you've got 10 times the adrenaline pumping through your veins that you normally do, are you still able to get your muscles to do the right amount of pressure and momentum and speed and the arc and everything else that you're supposed to do? Are you able to recreate that during those intense, difficult moments? You've got somebody's hand in your face, you're falling to the side, whatever it is that you're doing, you're having to do that same thing, but you're having to do it in an incredible environment. So I'm going to use one other example, one other story. I'm a real estate agent for the last 12-ish years. During that time, I've realized that the best real estate agents are incredibly knowledgeable and practice their craft. The best agents practice daily. They get up every morning and they practice on how they're going to speak with people in person. They practice how they're going to speak with people over the phone. They learn about what changes have occurred in the market. I met an agent recently that he was going to City Hall meetings and listening to their 15-year plan. My mind was blown. I consider myself an incredible agent. I consider myself incredibly knowledgeable, but I do not go to City Hall meetings to find out about that and what's going on. But this guy did, and I was really impressed with him. When I got done, I actually messaged him and I said, "Hey, I just want to let you know that I'm I'm really impressed with the level of dedication that you put into your job. And so why do real estate agents practice what they're going to say to people in person, what they're going to say over the phone, their knowledge? They practice so that way, when they're under pressure, when they're in that moment talking to that person, it is second nature. They know how to do it. The thing is that we need to learn skills that will help us rise to excellence in whatever our focus is. Whatever it is we're doing, we need the skills necessary in order to do that thing at the highest level possible. And you see people doing it in whatever career field they're in. There's continuing education if you're a therapist. You're going to seminars, you're learning new things, you're reading books. If you're a doctor, you're going and you're learning about the newest procedures and different things like that. Whatever it is, if you want to do something at an incredible level, you learn the information, you practice the skills, you do whatever it takes in order to have the skill set, in order to perform at the highest level, and you do it repetitively. Now, here's the thing. We do that in our careers. We do that in our work. But how often are we practicing and learning the skills in order to live our life? How often are you spending practicing, developing, and adding the skill set in order to be a good parent, in order to regulate your emotions, in order to frame your thoughts in a way that you can have a growth mindset and look at things in new, creative, and powerful, empowering ways that can help you in your daily life? How often are you practicing how to manage your thoughts so that they benefit you? How often are you practicing things in order to help you shift your identity so that you can create and do the things that you want to do? So that when you are in those pressured moments, you can perform. I realized this the other day. I was in this really intense emotional state. I was having this really big struggle. And I looked at it and I realized that I wasn't doing something that I knew I was supposed to do. Something that I'd practiced and trained for, but I wasn't performing. And I realized that what I do is I know how to do emotional regulation. I know how to frame my thoughts. I know how to manage my thoughts. I know how to do all these different things that can benefit me in my life. But do I have them mastered at the level that when the pressure is on the line, when the emotions are high, when you're stressed, when you're sad, when you're whatever it is that you're dealing with, are you able to have it so dialed in that it still shows up in those difficult moments? Because it doesn't matter how good you are at shooting a shot in practice. If you don't have it dialed in well enough that you can make the shot when the pressure's on the line, it does you no good. And it's the same thing with our lives. I do this thing, I started doing this about 2 years ago, is I learned all these things. And whenever I learn something new, I make a note in my phone. I make an audio file in my phone. I have over 1,100 audio recordings in my phone in the last year and a half. And it's impossible for me to remember all the different things I've learned, all the different ahas that I've done. And so what I do is I go and I make a recording of the most important topics, the most important concepts that I want to drill into my head. And I make those audio recordings, and then I listen to them in the morning. And when I first make those audio recordings and I listen to them in the morning on my way to the gym and on my way home and on my way to work, when I first do it, it's exciting. And I spend all this time listening to it. But eventually what happens is it becomes monotonous and it becomes boring, and I stop doing it. And when I heard this audio recording about Steph, I said, well, where in my life am I showing up or not showing up at that level of dedication that Steph Curry has? And it occurred to me that my practice is listening to those audio recordings every morning. But what happens is I get bored with my practice. And two things occurred to me. That one, sometimes practice doesn't have to be exciting. Sometimes you just do it because that's what's necessary in order to create what you want to create. If I want to show up at the highest level possible, if I want to be able to manage my emotions when emotions are at their highest, if I want to remember how to look at failure, if I want to remember how to look at rejection during those hardest, most difficult moments, if I want to manage my thoughts even when I'm failing and making mistakes and feel like beating myself up, I need to practice it at the level that it shows up even under the hardest conditions that I have. So what do? Every morning, I listen to those audio recordings. I've got about half an hour worth of audio recordings, and I listen to them every single day, no matter what. Because the only way I'm going to have that skill at that level is if I put in that level of dedication. And some days it's boring and I do it anyway. But what's even better is I work to figure out how can I make it exciting. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll start saying my recording along with my recording, because these are recordings that I've made to myself. Sometimes I'll memorize them and I'll practice them, or I'll get excited, or whatever I need to do in order to try and make it more interesting and more exciting. So that's the thought that I want to leave with you today. Is if you're willing to put the effort in to be an incredible parent, or you're willing to put in the effort to be incredible at your job, why aren't you doing that in the most important areas of your life? Your finances are obviously incredibly important. But why do we do all the things that we do in life? Almost everything that we do, if you bring it down and you dial it in enough, you'll realize that underneath the surface, everything we do in life is about an emotion. It's about feeling a certain way. We want to have money because this is how we're going to feel if we have that money. We want to have success in this area because that's how we're going to feel. We want to have the relationship because we want to have this feeling. Almost everything we do as human beings is so that we can have a feeling. Yet, how much time do you put in trying to create the tools and the skills so that you can consistently have the feelings that you want to have? I hope that you'll think about that. I hope that you'll implement that, and that will make a difference in your life. That's everything for today. Remember that you are not alone. There are people out there that love you and care about you. There are people that will show up for you if you just ask.